Whenever you're ready.
All right, I'll call the meeting of the Essex Junction City Council to order. Are there any agenda additions or changes?
Not for me.
No? Okay, don't need to approve the agenda. Any public to be heard for this meeting? There's nobody here in the room. We have one or two people on Zoom. Is there any comments you have on items that aren't on the agenda tonight for those in Zoom land? Carol, you're muted.
Thank you.
Sure.
I'm actually not Carol. I'm using my wife's computer.
Okay.
So I'm Sean Foley, resident of Essex Junction, and I was interested in the discussion regarding the charter amendments, and so I have no other comments as to anything else, but I would like to weigh in on those. So when that
Just 1 minute, we'll get right to it.
yeah.
Great. All right, so we'll open the public hearing on the second public hearing on the proposed charter changes. I don't know, Regina, if you want to say anything about them or...
Yeah, so this is probably at least the second, if not the third meeting that we've talked about these changes. In the packet, there is a memo back from January 20th that describes the purpose of these charter change amendments. And I can bring the actual amendments up on my screen just to review those again. There are essentially 4 draft amendments, and these will be on the warning, which is the only way I put them in the packet. These up.
When I checked your website for the charter amendments, I only saw 3. You said there's 4?
Yeah, so let me scroll up a little bit here. 1 second. Okay, so there are, oh, dang it.
Technology.
Okay, this first one, so there are 2 amendments to section 206A, and they are have 2 different purposes, and so there's actually will be 4 questions. So the first question is about whether adding this phrase of unless allowed by state statute to section 206A should be added. And so we are adding that section to basically say that a city council person could be employed if that's allowed by state statute. Health officer is one of those positions that if we don't fill that position, state statute basically says the chair of the legislative body has to do that role. So that's the concept there.
And we were in that position in January.
Yes.
Right? Okay.
Then the second change to 206B that's proposed is that this last sentence that exists there today is proposed to come out. And that essentially establishes a timeline of 1 year between a council member getting off the council and if they want to seek employment for the city. Right now, they'd have to wait a whole year. So the proposal is to remove that time period. Then the third question, which is Article 4, really is about the moderator. So currently, the charter calls for the voters to elect the moderator on an annual basis, and that person serves to moderate the annual meeting. Because the city now is only voting by Australian ballot and we don't have any floor votes, the suggestion is that the council can appoint the moderator and they would preside over the informational meeting, not the voting day, essentially. Then the last charter change is Article 5 on the ballot, and it addresses Section 401 of the charter. And basically right now, the charter calls for the voters to set the annual meeting by vote the whole year before we're going to actually have this meeting. The suggestion is to change this to by January of each year, the council shall identify that date of the next annual meeting. And this can just provide some flexibility in the future if we're thinking about changing. Right now, I think the city appreciates the connection to the school vote and wants to keep that one vote time period for city residents. But if the school vote potentially moves possibly to town meeting day, then we would have flexibility of figuring out if that is what the city wants to do as well. I think that's it.
Great.
Thank you.
I don't have anything unless anybody else has anything to add there. So I'm sorry, can you repeat your name, sir?
Yeah, my name is Sean Foley.
Sorry. Okay.
Yeah, Sean Foley, and I'm a resident of Essex Junction. And as minor as these changes might seem, I just want to express that I am adamantly against all of them. I know that might seem weird, but anytime apparently, I get that there's no longer a community meeting for town meeting, and it's done by Australian ballot, but you will still have a moderator. And why not let people select the moderator, as well as when the community wants to collectively meet and debate their issues or vote on their issues if they're not going to have a normal town meeting. Anytime you take a vote away from the residents, the constituency, I think it's a step in the wrong direction, backward step. My understanding is that there are other towns that are looking at similar measures, and also probably looking at them from the same perspective, whether it's sort of a housekeeping mentality, or whether it's just we want to make things more efficient, less hassle, whatever the motivation is. There are other towns looking at it for similar reasons, and probably looking at one another thinking, oh, that's a good idea, let's do that. It may seem like an isolated minor change here in Essex Junction, but if other towns start doing it, before you know it, you kind of have a movement, and the movement is toward taking more votes away from the voters. And I just don't think that's a healthy direction. And I think all of you have devote an incredible amount of time and selflessly dedicate yourselves to this community and running the town. And I would think that you, of all people, would want to protect its democratic nature of the process. So I would suggest and invite you to look at it from a different perspective, not like just what might work most efficiently, what might work best for the council and the council members, but what's going to support the democratic process as a whole and be best and most healthy for the community in that regard. Like I said before, I think these are moving backward if you're looking at it from that perspective. Likewise, modifying, streamlining, reducing the conflict of interest amendment. Why would you do that? The point of that amendment is embedded in its title, conflict of interest prohibitions. There's a reason why they put a 1-year holding period for people, and that's so that council members are actually making decisions that are in the community's best interest, not in what might be in their own best interest come a short period of time when they potentially could leave the council and be working in another position. We don't want council members making decisions that are in the interest of the best interest of their position or their career or even their salary. And I think a 1-year waiting period is a protective measure to help dissuade and prohibit that. And that's why it was put into place to begin with. What's the motivation to make it easier for there to be a conflict of interest. That makes absolutely no sense to me. And, revolving door syndrome can happen here in a small town just as well as it can happen anywhere in any form of government. So, I think I laud the amendment that was put in there and the reasons why it was put in there. And I don't see any reason to change it.
All right, thank you.
Let me just add one other point, please. Again, the council may be looking at this from, hey, what makes everything just easier, simpler? And this is just, a one-off or an isolated thing. But like I said, if other towns start taking similar measures and next year the council goes, well, that worked pretty well. It was easier for us. And what other things might we do to better streamline the process and make things more efficient? And you might start checking off a couple other areas where the voters don't need to, or seemingly might not need to make the choice on a minor issue and take other votes away from the voter. So, if you're still looking at these types of things from that same perspective in a year's time, what's to say there's not more measures taken and more votes taken away from the residents? And again, like I said, if other towns start doing this, you then have a movement in a certain direction. And I think it's the wrong direction. And we can look back in our history at major shifts in our social or political landscape, and we could point to a certain time and say, yep, that was, that had a huge impact in our society. But what we don't see when we look back in time, and what might be impossible to actually illuminate, is the 10 or 20 or 30 years of small, seemingly minor or incremental changes that made that large shift possible. And if the large shift is in a positive direction, we might look back on that and say, yeah, that was a fight well fought and a victory hard won. It's good for us. But if those incremental changes are in the wrong direction in 20 or 30 years time, we might regret the major shift that occurs as a result of these small changes that are happening on town level and state level. And again, I encourage you to look at this from a very different perspective than you're currently looking at it from. And I would encourage you to not move forward on these amendments. And I would voice that I'm adamantly against it, and I would suggest that other voters be against it as well.
All right, thank you. I just want to give you some context very quickly, though, on the third and fourth, which are the moderator and date. The date first, we've identified a number of potential situations where planning a year out may not give us the flexibility we need. As our manager, Regina Mahoney, mentioned earlier, we don't know. Right now, we're paired with the school. We don't know how that's going to play out in the long term. They decide to move their date and make it more efficient for Westford and town voters and go to town meeting day, then we're waiting a year or more, sometimes 2 years, for a charter change to occur to make this change. The community overwhelmingly chose Australian ballot. I think it was last year, the year before.
Mm-hmm.
History is not good right now. And I think that provides us an opportunity for reimagining how the informational portion of that process plays out. How can we bring more people in than the traditional 120 that attend annual meeting with a moderator? What does that process look like, since no decisions can be made there, and only where we're looking at a process where we're now trying to attract people to public hearings months before that annual hearing. So once that annual meeting with the moderator occurs, it's largely performative and informational. If voters want to actually provide input in this new paradigm, they need to show up at public hearings months before that. So we're going to have an annual meeting in a few weeks, couple weeks, 3 weeks, and nothing can be changed at that point. 2 weeks ago, I think, was the last time anybody could offer a request. No, it was last week. We did the warning last week. So we're really trying to prepare ourselves to increase engagement and participation, and frankly, not have to have people come out a year in advance and commit to something where they don't know as moderator what that's going to be. I mean, those are my reasons for doing it, but I just wanted to say that I do understand what you're saying, and I hear you. We don't have to change your mind. Don't have to agree with each other. But that's kind of part of where we're coming from on some of this. As we start out, we're noticing some of these things are, efficient's the wrong word, not as well thought out. One thing causing another, that chain reaction is causing some change. And the last thing I'll put to that is the legislature really has to address how they're dealing with the requirement to have that informational meeting only 10 days before the vote, because now we're mailing ballots sometimes a month in advance. So again, that informational meeting with the moderator is becoming largely performative because many people will already have voted before that even occurs. So we're in a situation where we have to figure out and have to have some flexibility in terms of how to get people to pay attention, participate, hear their input, feel heard, and have an opportunity to get the information, think about it, then come back to the second or third public hearing and give us their thoughts on it. So that's kind of part of the process here. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you. Can I comment to that?
Sure.
Yeah, I fully support the effort to get more information out in community and better educate people regarding these issues and regarding what they're going to be voting on. And whatever that process may look very different in the near future. I mean, media is changing, everything's changing, how we exchange information is changing. At the same time, if there's going to be a moderator in place and the moderator has a role, even if you want to call it perfunctory and performative, why not let the voters choose that moderator? Unless, I mean, how would that change the whole information process that you've laid out?
Well, in my head, it has a moderator agreeing to do something that they're not sure they don't have an idea of what that's going to be a year hence. So we're asking someone to step forward and run for moderator, to be voted on and agree to do a job that may be completely different than what they imagined in advance. And so it also provides an opportunity for more people to participate as moderator, because some people may be put off from being on a ballot. We have numerous committees and committee chairs, some of them in our charter, Development Review Board and Planning Commission and others, where the city council hears people come forward, we interview them, we select them. I don't see it, I personally don't see it as being that different, but I get your point. In my head, it's asking someone to plan and commit a year out without knowing the date and without understanding what that role is going to actually look like.
What can't that role be better defined and clarified? I mean, if they're going to be, say you're asking them to be involved earlier on in the process, that could be part of the job description. And so, moderators, as anybody know, things are changing. And so the idea that they should expect whatever moderator, I apologize for that, that's my phone, whatever moderator role they play would be identical to what it was 10 years ago. I don't think they would even expect that. But I think that could all be taken care of through clarity and information and a job description as to what would be required of the moderator.
Gotcha.
Anyway, I think it's still doable. So that's, yeah.
Well, thank you. So is there anyone else in Zoom? I haven't looked at Zoom in a few minutes. Anyone else that wants to add anything to this before we close the public hearing? Going once? Twice? All right. I will close the public hearing and bring it back to the board. Any discussion on the, no?
No.
And there's no vote?
That was just public to concur.
No, that was the public hearing. I opened the public hearing.
Yep.
public to be heard. There was nothing besides wanting to comment on the public hearing.
Yep.
All right, no vote on this because it's been, right?
Yes.
Okay,
These
and-
were approved as part of the warning last Wednesday, and so they will be on the ballot.
Okay. We don't have anything in consent. There's no reading file, no executive session. So I would entertain a motion to
I
adjourn.
move we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And we are adjourned.